The mating ceremony was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Vesna had waited 3 years for Cormac to claim her publicly. 3 years of secret glances and whispered promises, and a bond that hummed between them like a living thing. Tonight, before the gathered wolves of Duskhollow, he would finally make her his. Instead, he walked past her without a glance and took her sister's hand. "I reject the bond," Cormac announced, his voice echoing through the great hall. "I choose Daciana." Vesna felt something shatter inside her chest. Not just her heart. The mate bond itself, that golden thread connecting her soul to his, snapped like a bowstring pulled too tight. The pain drove her to her knees. No one moved to help her. Her father looked away. Her sister smiled. She had been the last to know. 3 days later, a king arrived from across the frozen mountains. Lorcan of Eisenhold, the cold alpha, enemy of everything her people stood for. He had not come to conquer. He had come to collect. "Marry me," he said. No warmth in his voice, no softness in his winter-gray eyes. "Be my queen." "Why would you want a rejected mate?" "Because rejected mates have nothing left to lose." His gaze held hers. "And I have a use for someone with nothing to lose." He promised no love. He promised no kindness. He promised only power. Vesna said yes. Neither understood how impossible that arrangement would prove to be. The great hall of Duskhollow had been decorated with moonflowers and silver ribbon. Hundreds of candles burned in iron chandeliers, casting warm light across the faces of the gathered wolves. Every noble family in the territory had come to witness the alpha heir claim his fated mate. Vesna stood at the far end of the hall in a gown of pale ivory, her dark hair braided with tiny white blossoms. Her warm brown eyes, usually so steady, betrayed her nerves tonight. Her hands trembled at her sides. 3 years she had waited for this moment. 3 years of Cormac promising that the timing was not right, that his father would not approve, that they needed to wait just a little longer. But tonight, the waiting would end. She could feel the mate bond thrumming in her chest, that invisible thread connecting her heart to his. It had been there since her 18th birthday, when she had looked across a crowded room and met Cormac's amber eyes, and known with absolute certainty that he was hers. He had felt it too. She had seen the recognition in his face, the shock, the wonder. He had kissed her that night in the garden, and every secret moment since had only strengthened what lay between them. "You look beautiful." Vesna turned to find her younger sister beside her. Daciana wore deep crimson, her golden hair cascading over bare shoulders. She was always the lovelier of the two, with their mother's delicate features and their father's shrewd eyes. Tonight she looked radiant. "Thank you," Vesna said. "I can hardly believe this is finally happening." Something flickered across Daciana's face, too quick to identify. "Neither can I." The crowd stirred as the main doors opened. Cormac entered with his father, the current alpha of Duskhollow, both dressed in ceremonial black. Vesna's breath caught. Even after 3 years, the sight of him made her pulse race. Tall and broad-shouldered, with that mane of dark auburn hair and those eyes like molten gold. The bond sang between them as he approached, but he was not looking at her. His gaze swept across the hall, passing over Vesna as if she were invisible, and settled on someone just behind her. On Daciana. The first tendril of cold dread curled through Vesna's stomach. "Distinguished guests," the alpha announced, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. "We gather tonight to witness a sacred union. My son will now claim his chosen mate." Chosen. Not fated. Chosen. Vesna's chest tightened with growing panic. She watched Cormac step forward, watched his trajectory with growing horror as she realized he was not walking toward her. He moved past her close enough that she could smell his familiar scent, close enough that the bond screamed in her chest, demanding acknowledgement. He did not spare her a glance. Cormac stopped before Daciana and took her hand. "No." The word escaped Vesna in a whisper. "Before these witnesses," Cormac said, his voice steady and clear, "I reject the fated bond that binds me to Vesna of House Valtrin." The hall erupted in gasps. The bond in Vesna's chest convulsed as if struck. "I declare it void, unwanted, unmade." Each word was a blade. Vesna felt the golden thread between them begin to fray, felt it tearing loose from somewhere deep inside her where it had taken root years ago. "And in its place," Cormac continued, "I choose freely. I choose without the compulsion of fate." He lifted Daciana's hand to his lips. "I choose Daciana." The mate bond snapped. Vesna heard herself scream, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. Pain exploded through her chest, pain unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was not heartbreak. It was not grief. It was as if someone had reached inside her and torn out something essential. Something that could never be replaced. Her knees buckled. She hit the stone floor hard, her ivory gown pooling around her like a surrender flag. Through blurred vision, she saw her father turn his back. She saw her sister smile, a small, satisfied curve of lips that held no surprise at all. They had known. All of them. They had planned this. "Get her out of here," someone muttered. "She is making a scene." Hands gripped her arms, hauling her upright. Servants, not family. No one from her bloodline moved to help as she was half dragged, half carried from the great hall. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Cormac pulling Daciana into his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that should have been Vesna's. The doors slammed shut. The bond was gone. And Vesna understood that her life, as she had known it, was over. 3 days passed in a haze of grief and humiliation. Vesna did not leave her chambers. She could not eat, could barely sleep. The place where the mate bond had lived felt like an open wound, raw and weeping. She kept reaching for it instinctively, kept expecting to feel that warm presence in her chest, and finding only emptiness. The servants whispered outside her door. The whole territory was talking about her rejection. About how the alpha heir had looked at his fated mate and found her so lacking that he had chosen someone else entirely. About how Vesna had collapsed and screamed like a wounded animal in front of every noble family in Dusk Hollow. On the 3rd morning, her father finally summoned her. Lord Hareth Valtrin sat behind his desk, a man carved from cold stone. He did not rise when Vesna entered, did not offer comfort or explanation. He simply looked at her with the same distant disappointment he had shown her entire life. "You have become an embarrassment," he said. "No wolf in this territory will take you now. You are damaged goods." Vesna stood motionless. She had no tears left. However, her father straightened a stack of papers on his desk. "An opportunity has presented itself. A messenger arrived this morning from Eisenhold." Vesna's hollow grief flickered with confusion. "Eisenhold? They are our enemies." "They were our enemies. Relations have been complicated since the border wars ended." Her father's jaw tightened. "The Alpha King has requested an audience with you specifically." "With me? Why?" "I neither know nor care. What matters is that he expressed interest, and you are in no position to refuse attention from anyone, let alone a king." Her father waved a dismissive hand. "You will meet with him this afternoon. Try not to humiliate the family further." The Alpha King of Eisenhold arrived as winter arrives, sudden and absolute and impossible to ignore. Vesna had heard stories about Lorcan all her life. The Cold Alpha, they called him. The Frost King. He had taken his father's throne at 19 after a bloody coup and had held it through sheer ruthless efficiency ever since. His wolves were feared throughout the northern territories. His kingdom was said to be as unforgiving as he was. She expected a monster. The man who entered the receiving chamber was something else entirely. He was tall, taller even than Cormac, with pale silver hair that fell just past his jaw and eyes the color of a frozen lake. His features were sharp and angular, almost severe, but there was a stillness to him that commanded attention more than any display of dominance could. He moved like a predator who had no need to prove his strength, and he was looking at her with absolute focus. Lady Vesna. His voice was deep, quiet, edged with frost. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I was not given a choice, Your Majesty. A flicker of approval crossed those gray eyes. No, he agreed. I suppose you were not. He did not sit, did not engage in pleasantries. He simply studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. I will be direct, Lorcan said. I have come to offer you a marriage. Vesna stared at him. Excuse me? You are unmated, rejected publicly by the heir of my rival territory. Your reputation is ruined, your prospects non-existent. He said it without cruelty, simply stating facts. I am offering you an alternative. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why would the Alpha King of Eisenhold want a rejected mate as his queen? Lorcan's expression did not change. Because a rejected mate understands something that pampered princesses do not. She understands what it means to have everything stripped away. She understands survival. He took a step closer. Despite herself, Vesna held her ground. I do not need a wife who loves me, he continued. I need a queen who will not break, who has already endured the worst and emerged standing. You do not know what I have endured. I know you were humiliated before your entire territory and did not beg. His eyes held hers. I know you are still standing in front of me, rather than hiding in your chambers. That tells me enough. Vesna's pulse quickened. This made no sense. Kings did not marry disgraced daughters of minor lords. Kings did not travel across mountains to collect women their rivals had thrown away. What do you gain from this? She asked. A queen who owes me everything. A political statement that will humiliate Dusk Hollow for a generation. And... He paused. Someone who has nothing left to lose. You keep saying that. Because it matters. Lorcan's voice dropped lower. I need someone who will not be afraid to stand beside me. What I face requires courage that comfortable women do not possess. Vesna wanted to ask what he faced, wanted to demand answers, but something in his expression warned her that those answers would not come easily. If I refuse? Then you stay here. He glanced around the modest chamber with barely concealed disdain. You watch your sister become Lady of Dusk Hollow while you fade into obscurity. You spend the rest of your life being pitied or forgotten. His gaze returned to her. Or you come with me. You become queen of the largest territory in the north, and you never feel powerless again. Vesna thought of Cormac's hand in Daciana's, thought of her father's cold dismissal, thought of the empty place in her chest where the bond used to live. She had nothing here, no mate, no future, no one who cared whether she lived or died. I have conditions, she heard herself say. Lorcan's eyebrow rose slightly. Name them. I will not be a puppet queen. If I am to stand beside you, I will have genuine authority. Agreed. I will not share your bed unless I choose to. A pause. Then, agreed. And you will never lie to me? Whatever you are hiding, whatever you need me for, you will tell me the truth when I ask for it. Lorcan studied her for a long moment. Something akin to respect flickered in his gaze. Agreed, he said, with one condition of my own. Which is? You will not fall in love with me. His voice was flat, final. This is an arrangement of mutual benefit. Nothing more. I will be a good husband to you. I will protect you, provide for you, and respect you. But I will not love you. And I do not want your love in return. The words should have stung. 3 days ago they would have devastated her. But the place where her heart used to be capable of such things felt hollow now, cauterized by rejection. That, Vesna said quietly, will not be a problem. Lorcan extended his hand. Then we have an accord. Vesna took it. His grip was cold, far colder than any wolf's hand should be. She felt the chill seep into her skin, strange and unsettling. She had just agreed to marry a man she did not know, for reasons she did not understand, in a kingdom she had been raised to fear. But when she looked into those winter-gray eyes, she did not see cruelty. She saw something else. Something guarded and careful and almost desperate beneath the frost. Whatever King Lorcan of Eisenhold was hiding, she would find out. The announcement of her betrothal sent shockwaves through Dusk Hollow. Vesna stood in her father's great hall as the formal documents were signed, watching the faces of those who had turned their backs on her 3 days ago. Shock, confusion, and beneath it, the first glimmers of fear. An alliance between House Valtrin and Eisenhold changed everything. The rejected daughter they had dismissed was about to become the most powerful queen in the Northern Territories. Lord Harath's hand trembled slightly as he signed. He had not anticipated this outcome. None of them had. "The wedding will take place in Eisenhold in 3 days' time," Lorcan said, his tone making clear this was not a negotiation. "Lady Vesna will travel with me tomorrow." "So soon?" Vesna's father frowned. "Surely a proper ceremony requires more preparation." "I do not require a proper ceremony. I require a wife." Lorcan's gaze swept across the gathered nobles with thinly veiled contempt. "Unless you have objections?" No one spoke. No one dared. "Then we are finished here." As the nobles filed out, whispering urgently among themselves, Vesna caught sight of a familiar figure hovering near the doorway. Daciana. Her sister's face was pale, her golden beauty dimmed by something Vesna could not quite identify. Anger? Fear? Regret? Daciana crossed the hall before Vesna could escape. "You cannot be serious about this." Her sister's voice was low, urgent. "He is the cold alpha, Vesna. Do you know what they say about him?" "I know what they said about me 3 days ago." Vesna kept her voice even. "That I was worthless. Damaged. Unfit to be anyone's mate." Daciana flinched. "That is not what I meant." "No? Then what do you want, sister?" "Surely not to wish me well. I want to warn you." Daciana stepped closer, lowering her voice further. "There are rumors about Eisenhold, about the king. They say he is cursed, that every woman who gets close to him dies." Vesna laughed, the sound hollow. "Perhaps I will fit right in then. The rejected mate, and the cursed king. What a pair we shall make." "This is not a joke." Daciana gripped her arm. "You cannot trust him. There is something wrong with him, something he is hiding." Vesna looked at her sister's hand on her arm, at the fingers that had intertwined with Cormac's, and felt nothing but cold. "You are the last person in this world who should be warning me about hidden intentions." She pulled free. "I know what you did. I know you planned it. All of it. You wanted Cormac, and you took him. Congratulations, sister. He is yours. Now stay out of my way." Daciana's expression flickered. For one instant, something vulnerable surfaced in her eyes, then it vanished behind that polished mask. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "When you discover what he really is, you will wish you had stayed here where it was safe." "Safe?" Vesna stepped closer, holding her sister's gaze. "There is nothing safe about this place. There never was." She walked away before Daciana could respond. The following morning, Vesna's belongings were packed into a single trunk. She had not accumulated much worth keeping. Some clothes, a few books, a locket that had belonged to her mother, the only parent who had ever shown her genuine love before illness took her 7 years past. She was standing in the courtyard, waiting beside the Eisenhold carriage, when the last person she expected appeared. Cormac. He looked haggard. Dark circles shadowed his golden eyes, and his jaw was rough with stubble. The confident alpha heir who had rejected her 3 days ago seemed diminished somehow, uncertain. "Vesna." He stopped several feet away, as if afraid to get closer. "I need to speak with you." "We have nothing to say to each other." Please. The word came out ragged. Just give me a moment, before you leave. Vesna should have walked away, should have climbed into that carriage and never looked back. But some wounded part of her, some fragment still bleeding from the broken bond, wanted to hear what he could possibly say. One moment, she said coldly. Speak. Cormac ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she recognized from years of intimacy. I made a mistake. Silence stretched between them. A mistake, Vesna repeated flatly. The bond, I thought. My father convinced me that choosing Daciana was the strategic decision, that a fated mate was a weakness, that choosing freely showed strength. He took a step toward her, but I feel it still. The echo of what was between us. It haunts me, Vesna. She stared at him, waiting for the pain to come, waiting for the grief and longing to overwhelm her. But the place where those feelings should have lived was hollow. You rejected me in front of everyone I knew, she said slowly. You let me fall to my knees while my sister smiled. You chose her, you kissed her. And now, 3 days later, you call it a mistake? I was wrong. Cormac reached for her hand. Let me fix this. Refuse the marriage. Stay here. We can rebuild what we had. What we had? Vesna pulled away from his grasp. What we had was a lie. You knew what you were going to do that night. You let me walk into that hall believing you would claim me. You let me hope. Vesna, please. No. The word came out sharp and final. You broke something that cannot be mended. The bond is gone. I felt it die. And whatever ghost of it you think you feel, I assure you, I feel nothing. It was not entirely true. Some small ember still flickered in that hollow space, some remnant of what had been. But Vesna would burn it to ash before she let him see it. The Alpha King is waiting. She turned toward the carriage. Goodbye, Cormac. He will never love you. Cormac's voice followed her, desperate and raw. He is incapable of it. Everyone knows the curse of Eisenhold. You are trading one heartbreak for another. Vesna paused with her hand on the carriage door. Perhaps, she said without looking back. But at least he was honest about it from the beginning. She climbed inside. The door closed. And as the carriage began to move, carrying her away from everything she had known, Vesna allowed herself one final glance through the window. Cormac stood frozen in the courtyard, watching her go. Beside the main entrance, Daciana had appeared, her face twisted with an expression Vesna could not read. And in an upper window her father observed the departure with the same cold indifference he had shown her entire life. None of them had expected this. None of them had thought the rejected daughter would rise from the ashes of her humiliation and become a queen. Vesna turned away from the window. The past was behind her. Whatever lay ahead in Eisenhold, whatever secrets King Lorcan was hiding, she would face it on her own terms. She was done being the woman things happened to. From now on, she would be the woman who made things happen. The journey to Eisenhold took 2 days through mountain passes still heavy with late spring snow. Vesna spent most of it in silence, watching the landscape transform beyond the carriage window. The green valleys of Dusk Hollow gave way to dense pine forests, then to bare rocky slopes, and finally to a world of white and gray where winter seemed to hold permanent dominion. Lorcan rode alongside the carriage rather than inside it. She caught glimpses of him through the frost-touched glass, silver hair whipping in the cold wind, his posture straight and commanding even after hours in the saddle. He never seemed to tire, never seemed to feel the biting cold that made Vesna pull her furs tighter around her shoulders. On the second evening, the carriage crested a final ridge, and Vesna saw Eisenhold for the first time. The castle rose from the mountainside like something grown rather than built, all pale stone and sharp towers that caught the dying light and held it. A frozen lake spread before it, the surface so clear and still that the castle's reflection seemed like a second fortress beneath the ice. It was beautiful in a way that stole breath. Beautiful and utterly unforgiving. Home, Lorcan said, appearing at the carriage window. His breath did not mist in the frigid air. Or it will be, after tomorrow. Vesna studied the fortress that would become her prison or her palace, depending on how the next months unfolded. It suits you. A ghost of amusement crossed his features. Most people find it forbidding. Most people have not spent their lives in places where the warmth was a lie. She met his gray eyes. Cold that announces itself is easier to bear than cold that hides behind smiles. Lorcan regarded her for a long moment. Then he inclined his head slightly and rode ahead to announce their arrival. The wedding took place at sunset the following day. The great hall of Eisenhold was nothing like the warmth of Dusk Hollow. Here the walls were pale stone veined with silver, the chandeliers crafted from crystal that scattered light like frozen stars. No flowers decorated the space. Instead, arrangements of evergreen branches and white winter berries lined the aisle, their sharp, clean scent filling the air. Vesna wore a gown of deep midnight blue, a color Lorcan had specifically requested. "White is for innocent brides," he had said when she questioned it. "Blue is for queens who know their own minds." The guests who filled the hall were strangers to her. Northern wolves with pale coloring and sharp features, their expressions guarded as they watched their king's unexpected bride approach the altar. Vesna felt their assessment like fingers pressing against her skin, searching for weaknesses. She kept her spine straight and her eyes forward. Lorcan waited at the altar in formal black, the silver circlet of his station resting on his pale hair. In the crystalline light, he looked like something from an old legend, the winter king of stories mothers told to frighten children into obedience. But when Vesna reached him and placed her hand in his, she saw something behind those frozen eyes, something almost like relief. "You came," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "Did you expect me to flee?" "I expected nothing. Hope is a luxury I abandoned long ago." Before she could respond, the officiant began the ceremony. The words washed over Vesna in a blur of ancient vows and formal declarations. She repeated what she was told to repeat, promised what she was told to promise. But through it all, she was acutely aware of Lorcan's hand holding hers. Cold. So impossibly cold. The chill seeped through her skin and into her bones, strange and unsettling. "Do you, Lorcan of House Greymore, Alpha King of Eisenhold, take this woman as your mate, your queen, your partner in all things?" "I do." His voice carried through the hall without wavering. "And do you, Vesna of House Valtrin, take this man as your mate, your king, your partner in all things?" Vesna looked at the stranger she was binding herself to. This cold king with his secrets and his warnings. This man who had offered her power and demanded nothing but the absence of love. "I do." "Then by the ancient rites and the blessing of the moon, I pronounce you bound. You may seal the union." The hall went silent, waiting. Vesna expected him to kiss her. It was tradition. It was expected. Instead, Lorcan lifted her hand and pressed his cold lips to her knuckles, lingering there for a long moment before releasing her. "I will not take what is not freely offered," he murmured, "not even before witnesses." The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to everything she had been taught about Alpha Kings and their demands that Vesna found herself speechless. Whispers rippled through the crowd, confusion, curiosity. The new queen had not been kissed at her own wedding. What did it mean? Lorcan ignored them all. He tucked Vesna's hand into the crook of his arm and turned to face his people. "I present to you Vesna of Eisenhold," he announced, "your queen." The applause that followed was restrained, uncertain. These wolves did not know what to make of her, did not know what to make of a king who chose a rejected mate from an enemy territory, and then refused to claim her properly before the court. But Vesna barely heard them. She was still feeling the ghost of Lorcan's cold lips against her skin, still processing the careful respect in a gesture that could so easily have been a demand. He had promised not to love her. He had not promised to be unkind. As they walked together from the altar, husband and wife, king and queen, Vesna realized that she had no idea what to expect from this man. Every assumption she had made about him was crumbling. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous thing of all. The queen's chambers were larger than any room Vesna had ever occupied. A massive canopied bed dominated one wall, draped in fabrics of deep blue and silver. A fireplace tall enough to stand in crackled with flames that did little to chase away the persistent chill. Through tall windows she could see the frozen lake far below, glittering under a sky full of stars. The servants had unpacked her meager belongings and vanished with quiet efficiency. Now Vesna sat at the edge of the bed, her wedding gown still heavy around her, waiting. They had not discussed this part. The wedding night. What would be expected? What would be demanded? Lorcan had agreed to her condition about not sharing his bed unless she chose to. But he was a king, and she was now his queen, and the production of heirs was not merely personal, but political. A knock at the connecting door made her breath catch. "Enter," she called, pleased that her voice remained steady. Lorcan stepped through, having changed from his formal attire into simpler clothing. A white shirt unlaced at the throat, dark trousers, and bare feet. The informality of it startled her. In this state, he looked less like a legend and more like a man. A man with questions in his winter-gray eyes. "I wanted to ensure you had everything you needed," he said, remaining near the doorway. "The servants can be overly formal with newcomers." "Everything is fine, more than fine." Vesna gestured at the opulent chamber. "This room alone is larger than the entire suite I occupied in Dusk Hollow." Lorcan nodded but made no move to leave. The silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions. "We should discuss expectations," Vesna finally said, "for tonight." "There are no expectations." His voice was quiet. "I meant what I said about not taking what is not offered." "And the matter of heirs? Surely your council will have opinions about the succession." "My council has many opinions. I am not obligated to share them." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "When and if we produce children will be determined by mutual agreement, not political pressure." Vesna studied him, searching for the trap. Every alpha she had ever known demanded. They took. They asserted dominance in bedchambers as surely as in council rooms. Yet here was the most powerful king in the Northern Territories, standing in her doorway, making himself as unthreatening as possible. "Why are you being so careful with me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Because you have already been broken once. I have no interest in breaking you again." "I am not broken." "No." He tilted his head, studying her with that unsettling intensity. "You are wounded. There is a difference. Broken things cannot be mended. Wounded things heal, often stronger than before." Vesna's throat tightened. She had expected coldness from him, expected distance and formality, and the absence of affection he had promised. She had not expected to be seen. "You speak as if you know something about wounds," she said softly. "I know everything about wounds." He pushed away from the doorframe. "Sleep well, Vesna. Tomorrow you meet the court properly, and they will test you in ways you cannot anticipate. You will need your strength." He turned to leave. "Wait." Lorcan paused, not turning back. Vesna's thoughts raced. She did not know why she was doing this, did not know what impulse drove her forward. But the thought of spending her wedding night alone in this massive cold room, with the ghost of her broken bond still aching in her chest, felt unbearable. "Stay," she said. Not for that. Just," she faltered, hating how vulnerable she sounded. "I do not want to be alone tonight." Slowly, Lorcan turned. His expression was unreadable. "You are certain?" "I am certain that I am tired of empty rooms and silence. If this arrangement is to work, we might as well begin learning to be in each other's presence." For a long moment he did not move. Then he crossed the room to the fireplace and lowered himself into one of the chairs before it, stretching his long legs toward the flames. Then I will stay. For as long as you wish. Vesna released a breath she had not realized she was holding. She moved to the other chair, the wedding gown rustling as she settled into it. The fire crackled between them. Outside, wind howled against the windows. "Tell me something about Isenhold," she said. "Something the histories do not record." Lorcan considered. "The lake freezes so deeply in winter that the wolves hold races across it. The winner earns a favor from the crown, anything within reason. One year a young female asked for permission to study at the Healer's Academy, a path normally closed to her station. She is now my chief healer." Vesna smiled slightly. "You granted a female wolf access to education? The territories would call that radical." "The territories call many things radical that are simply practical. Talent does not respect bloodlines. Yet you are king by bloodline. I am king because I killed everyone who challenged my claim." His voice was matter of fact. "The bloodline merely gave me the right to make that challenge in the first place." A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. "You killed your own family?" "I killed those who would have killed me first." Lorcan's gaze remained fixed on the flames. "My father was not a good man, Vesna. The stories you heard about Isenhold in Dusk Hollow, the tales of cruelty and barbarism, most of them were true. But they were true of his reign, not mine." "And your mother?" "Died when I was young. Some say of illness. Others whisper my father's name." His jaw tightened. "I never learned the truth. Perhaps I did not want to." Vesna absorbed this glimpse behind the legend. The cold king who had taken his throne through blood. The boy who had lost his mother and never knew if his father was responsible. "We both have fathers who failed us," she said quietly. Lorcan finally looked at her. In the firelight, his sharp features seemed softer, almost human. "Yes," he agreed. "We do." They talked until the fire burned low. Small things at first, then larger ones. Vesna found herself sharing memories she had told no one: her mother's death, her father's indifference, the years of being overlooked in favor of Daciana. And Lorcan listened, offering no empty comfort, simply bearing witness. In return, he spoke of the loneliness of ruling, the weight of decisions that cost lives, the isolation of being feared by everyone around you. When Vesna's eyes grew heavy, Lorcan rose. "Sleep," he said. "I will be in my chambers if you need anything. You do not have to go." The words slipped out, heavy with exhaustion. "The bed is large enough." Lorcan went very still. "I told you I would not share your bed unless you chose it." "I am choosing." Vesna met his gaze. "Not for consummation, but I sleep better when I am not alone. It is a weakness, perhaps, but tonight I am too tired to be strong." The silence stretched. Then Lorcan inclined his head. "As you wish." He crossed to the far side of the bed, maintaining careful distance, and lay atop the covers fully clothed. Vesna slid beneath the sheets, acutely aware of his presence beside her. His cold radiated across the space between them like a winter draft. "You really are freezing," she murmured. "Is this the curse Cormac spoke of?" Lorcan did not answer for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant. "Sleep, Vesna. We can speak of curses another time." It should have unsettled her. It should have sent her running. But instead, with the fire crackling and the wind howling and this strange cold king keeping vigil beside her, Vesna felt something she had not felt in longer than she could remember. Safe. She fell asleep before she could examine why. The weeks that followed were nothing like Vesna had anticipated. She had expected coldness, formality, the polite distance of a political arrangement. Instead, she found herself drawn into the orbit of a man far more complex than his reputation suggested. Lorcan did not avoid her after that first night. He began appearing at her door each morning to escort her to breakfast, a courtesy no one expected from a king. He sat beside her in council meetings, asking her opinion on matters of trade and territory, in full view of advisors who clearly disapproved. When ambassadors from neighboring kingdoms arrived, he introduced her not as a decorative queen, but as a partner in his rule. "You are giving them ideas," his chief advisor muttered after one such meeting. "A queen who speaks in council, it will spread to other territories." "Good," Lorcan said calmly. "Perhaps they will learn something." Vesna watched these moments with growing confusion. Everything she had been taught about alpha kings, about dominance and submission, and the proper place of mates, crumbled a little more with each passing day. But it was the nights that undid her completely. Lorcan had not returned to her chambers after that first evening. He maintained the distance he had promised, sleeping in his own rooms on the other side of the connecting door. But Vesna found herself lying awake each night, listening for sounds of movement beyond that door, wondering what he was doing in the darkness. On the fifth night, she could bear it no longer. She crossed to the connecting door and knocked softly. Silence, then footsteps, and the door swung open. Lorcan stood there in the low lamplight, his silver hair loose around his shoulders, dark circles shadowing his eyes. He looked exhausted. He looked haunted. "Is something wrong?" His voice was rough with fatigue. "I could ask you the same." Vesna studied the hollows beneath his cheekbones, more pronounced than they had been days ago. "When did you last sleep?" "Sleep is not always possible for me." "Why?" He did not answer. He simply stepped aside, a silent invitation. Vesna entered his chambers for the first time. Where her rooms were elegant and formal, his were sparse. A bed with plain coverings, a desk overflowing with documents, a single chair by a fireplace where the flames burned low, and cold. The room was colder than hers, despite the fire. The chill seeped through her nightgown and raised bumps along her arms. "How do you bear it?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself. "The cold. It is coming from you, is it not? I feel it when I stand close. I felt it on our wedding night." Lorcan moved past her to stoke the fire, though they both knew it would not help. "It has been this way since I was 19, he said quietly. "Since I took the throne. Since you killed your father. Since I was cursed for killing my father." He straightened, his back still to her. "A witch loyal to him laid it upon me with her dying breath. Cold that will never leave my bones. Cold that grows worse with each passing year." Vesna's chest ached with sudden understanding. "Is that why you chose me? Someone already wounded? Already numb? You thought I would not notice? I thought you would not care." He turned to face her, and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. "Most queens want warmth, affection, passion. I cannot offer those things. The cold makes intimacy painful for my partners and eventually impossible for me. Every woman I have touched has flinched away. Every connection has ended in revulsion." Understanding crashed through Vesna like a wave. "You told me not to love you because you did not want to hurt me. I told you not to love me because everyone who has ever loved me has suffered for it." His voice cracked. "The curse feeds on connection. The closer someone gets, the colder I become. The more I care, the more the ice spreads." Vesna should have been afraid, should have retreated to her warm chambers and maintained the safe distance he had tried to create. But instead, she thought of his lips pressed to her knuckles at their wedding, gentle despite the cold. She thought of his careful questions in council, giving her voice when no one else would. She thought of the way he had lain beside her that first night, maintaining distance even when she had invited closeness, protecting her from a curse she had not known existed. "You have been fighting this alone," she said. "There is no one else to fight it with." Vesna crossed the room until she stood directly before him. The cold radiating from his body made her skin prickle, but she did not retreat. She lifted her hand and pressed her palm against his chest over his heart. The chill was sharp enough to ache, but beneath it, she felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You are not alone anymore," she said. Lorcan's hand came up to cover hers and she felt him tremble. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying. I spent 3 years loving someone who did not truly want me, 3 years waiting for him to choose me while he was planning to choose my sister. I know what it is to feel cold, Lorcan. I know what it is to reach for warmth and find nothing there." She met his gray eyes. "You saved me from that fate. Let me help you with yours." "You cannot break the curse." "Perhaps not. But I can share the weight of it." For a long moment they stood frozen, her warm hand against his frozen chest, the firelight casting shadows across his sharp features. A wall was crumbling in his expression, one she sensed had stood for years. "If you stay close to me," he said hoarsely, "the cold will spread to you. You will suffer. I cannot allow that." "You are not allowing anything. I am choosing." She pressed harder against his chest, feeling his heart quicken beneath her palm. "You gave me choice when no one else would. Now I am giving you the same courtesy." Lorcan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something raw and desperate flickered in their depths. "This is a mistake," he whispered. But he did not push her away. Instead, slowly, carefully, he covered her hand with both of his and held it against his heart as if it were something precious. As if she were something precious. They stood that way until dawn crept through the windows, neither speaking, neither moving, simply sharing warmth and cold in equal measure. And as the first light touched Lorcan's silver hair, turning it to gold, Vesna realized with terrifying clarity that she had already begun to break the only promise he had asked her to keep. She was falling in love with him. The question was whether that love would save them, or destroy them both. 3 months had transformed everything. Vesna stood at the window of her chambers, watching snow fall over the frozen lake below. Her hand rested unconsciously on her stomach, where new life had begun to quicken just days ago. The healers had confirmed it that morning. She was carrying Lorcan's child. She should have felt joy. Instead, terror coiled through her. Their arrangement had been simple. A marriage of convenience. No love, no emotional entanglement. But somewhere between the council meetings and the quiet conversations by firelight and the nights spent pressed against his frozen skin, those boundaries had dissolved entirely. She loved him. Desperately, completely. In ways she had never loved Cormac. In ways she had not known she was capable of loving anyone. And now she carried his heir. Which meant the political purpose of their marriage would soon be fulfilled. Which meant he might decide he no longer needed her close. "You are brooding." Vesna turned to find Lorcan in the doorway, snow dusting his silver hair. He had been out with the border patrol since dawn, and exhaustion lined his features. But his eyes found hers immediately, and something in them softened. He crossed the room and stood behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. The cold of his touch no longer made her flinch. Somehow, over these months, she had grown accustomed to it, had even begun to crave it. "The healers told you," she said quietly. "They told me." His hands tightened slightly. "A child, Vesna. Our child. You sound almost happy about it." "Why would I not be happy?" She turned to face him, searching his expression. "Because this was supposed to be political. Practical. You made me promise not to love you." "I remember what I made you promise." "Then you should know that I have failed." The words escaped in a rush, too fast to call back. "I love you, Lorcan. I have loved you for weeks. Perhaps longer. I know it was not part of our arrangement. I know you do not want it. But I cannot keep pretending otherwise." Lorcan went very still. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Vesna," he said carefully. "You do not understand what you are saying." "I understand perfectly. I am saying that I love you, that watching you ride away each morning makes me ache. that falling asleep beside you is the only peace I have known in years, that the thought of you pulling away from me now when I am carrying your child is unbearable. Tears burned her eyes. I know you cannot love me back. I know the curse makes it impossible. But I needed you to know the truth before I went mad from hiding it. The silence that followed was absolute. Lorcan stared at her with an expression she could not read. Pain, yes, but something else beneath it. Something that looked terrifyingly like hope. You were supposed to be safe, he said hoarsely. That is why I chose you. A woman already wounded. A woman who had learned not to love. I thought if I could not inspire affection, the curse would have no hold. The curse responds to your love, not mine. Yes. He closed his eyes. It responds to mine. Vesna's heart stopped. Lorcan, what are you saying? I am saying that I have been fighting this since our wedding night. His voice cracked. I am saying that every moment I spend with you makes the cold worse because every moment I spend with you makes me care more. I am saying that I have tried to keep my distance, tried to protect us both, and I have failed entirely. He opened his eyes, and the raw anguish in them stole her breath. I love you, Vesna. I have loved you since you stood in your father's hall and told me you would not be a puppet queen. I have loved you since you held your hand against my frozen heart and told me I was not alone. Joy exploded through her chest, bright and fierce. Then Lorcan collapsed. He dropped to his knees with a strangled cry, his hands clawing at his chest. The cold that always radiated from him intensified until frost began forming on his clothing, his skin, spreading outward in crystalline patterns. No. Vesna fell beside him, grabbing his shoulders. Lorcan, what is happening? The curse. His voice was barely a whisper. I told you. When I love, truly love, it kills me. You cannot die. I will not allow it. You have to stop loving me. Take it back. Tell me you did not mean it. Lorcan's frozen hand found her face, cupping her cheek with agonizing tenderness. I would rather die loving you, he said, than live another century without it. No. Vesna's tears fell onto his frost-covered skin. There has to be a way. The witch who cursed you, she must have left a weakness, a counter, something. If there was, I would have found it years ago. His eyes were growing distant, the gray fading toward white. Listen to me. When I am gone, you will be Queen Regent until our child comes of age. The council will fight you. Do not let them win. Stop talking like you are already dead. I am dying, Vesna. I have been dying slowly since I admitted to myself what I felt for you. Saying the words aloud only accelerated what was already happening. She pulled him against her, his frozen body pressed to her warmth. The cold was sharp enough to burn, but she did not let go. I refuse to accept this. Her voice shook with fury. I spent 3 years loving someone who chose my sister. I endured rejection and humiliation and the shattering of a mate bond. I survived all of it. And then I found you. I found someone who saw me, who valued me, who gave me a crown and a voice and a home. I will not lose you now. Do you hear me? I will not. Lorcan's lips brushed her forehead, ice cold. Then find a way, he whispered. Because I cannot. His eyes closed. His body went limp. And the frost continued spreading, creeping across his chest, up his throat toward his face. Vesna held him and screamed for help. But as the guards burst through the door, as the healers rushed in with their herbs and their magic, as chaos erupted around her, only one thought crystallized in her mind. She would find a way. Or she would burn the world down trying. Vesna did not sleep for 3 days. She sent messengers to every corner of the northern territories, summoning healers and hedge witches, and anyone who claimed knowledge of curses. She pored through the Eisenhold archives, reading accounts of Lorcan's father and the witch who had served him. She sat at Lorcan's bedside for hours, holding his frozen hand, watching the frost slowly encase his body like a tomb. The healers said he had perhaps a week before the ice reached his heart completely. Perhaps less. On the fourth day, hope arrived from an unexpected source. "There is a witch in the borderlands," said Marin, the chief healer who had once won a racing favor from Lorcan. "Old as the mountains themselves. They say she knows secrets that died with the ancients. Send for her. She does not come when summoned. You would have to go to her." Vesna was on horseback within the hour. The journey took a day and a half through treacherous mountain passes. By the time Vesna reached the witch's cave, she was half frozen and desperate. The woman who emerged from the shadows was small and bent, with eyes the color of storm clouds and hands gnarled like ancient roots. She studied Vesna for a long moment before speaking. "The Queen of Eisenhold. I wondered when you would come. You knew I would seek you out? I knew the curse would eventually bring someone to my door." The witch gestured for Vesna to enter. "I am Nesta. I taught the witch who cursed your king, long before she chose the path of vengeance." Vesna's heart lurched. "Then you know how to break it." "I know the curse was designed to be unbreakable. It binds to the bloodline, activating when true love is confessed. No external force can shatter it." Nesta paused, her storm cloud eyes gleaming. "But there is one thing the curse did not anticipate." "What?" "You." The witch led Vesna deeper into the cave, to a chamber lit by candles that burned with blue flame. Strange symbols covered the walls. The air itself seemed to hum with power. "Tell me about your mother," Nesta said. Vesna blinked. "My mother died when I was 12. She was kind, gentle. She had little magic that I ever saw." "Little magic that you saw." The witch smiled knowingly. "Your mother was of the Fenrath line, descendants of fire wolves, their blood carrying heat that can melt any ice." "That is impossible. I have no fire magic. I have never even shifted properly." "Because it was bound." Nesta's voice sharpened. "Tell me, child, did anything unusual happen when your mate bond with the Duskhollow air snapped?" Vesna thought back to that agonizing moment in the Great Hall. The pain, the emptiness, and beneath it, something else she had been too overwhelmed to examine. A spark. A flicker of heat that had ignited in the hollow where the bond used to be. "I felt warmth," she said slowly, "just for an instant. The false bond was suppressing your true nature. When it broke, your fire began to wake." Nesta's eyes bored into hers. "That bond was never real, Vesna. It was manufactured, implanted by dark magic to keep you from your true mate." The world tilted. "What?" "Someone knew what you were. Someone knew that if you found your true mate, your fire would awaken and become a threat to their plans. So they bound you to another, a wolf weak enough to be manipulated, and ensured you would never discover your power." Vesna's mind raced. The mate bond with Cormac had felt real. She had suffered when it broke, but even as she thought it, fragments of memory surfaced. The bond had never felt quite like the stories described. She had loved Cormac, yes, but there had always been a strange distance to it, a wall she could never breach. "Who would do this?" she demanded. "Someone who feared what you might become. Someone close enough to arrange it without suspicion." The answer crystallized with horrible clarity. "Daciana." Nesta nodded slowly. "Your sister has more magic than she pretends. Dark magic, learned from sources best left unnamed. She recognized your potential before you were old enough to understand it yourself. She stole Cormac to hurt me. She created the bond with Cormac to control you. Stealing him was simply the final move, ensuring the false bond would break and leave you too devastated to question what lay beneath." The witch leaned closer, but she did not anticipate that you would find your true mate. She did not anticipate Lorcan. Vesna's hands trembled. "Lorcan is my true mate? Why do you think his cold does not harm you? Why do you think your presence slows the curse's progression? Your fire calls to his ice. You are two halves of a whole, separated by machinations neither of you understood. Tears spilled down Vesna's cheeks. All those years of waiting for Cormac, of believing he was her destiny. All a lie. Her real destiny had been waiting across the frozen mountains, a cold king who needed the fire she did not know she possessed. How do I save him? Nesta pressed something into her hand, a small crystal vial filled with liquid that glowed like captured sunlight. This will not break the curse. Only you can do that. But it will lower your barriers long enough for your fire to emerge. The witch gripped her wrist. Be warned. If you use this, there is no going back. Your power will awaken fully. You will never be ordinary again. Vesna closed her fingers around the vial. I was never ordinary to begin with. The ride back to Eisenhold nearly killed her. Vesna pushed her horse beyond its limits, driven by terror and fury and a desperate hope she barely dared to trust. By the time the castle gates came into view, the animal was frothing, and Vesna could barely stay upright in the saddle. But she was not alone. A second rider waited in the courtyard, a familiar figure with auburn hair and golden eyes dimmed by exhaustion and shame. Cormac. What are you doing here? Vesna demanded, sliding from her horse. I came to warn you. His voice was hoarse. Daciana, she's coming. She knows about the witch you sought. She's planning to finish what the curse started while you're away. And why would you warn me? Why would you help the woman you rejected? Cormac flinched. Because I finally understand what she did to me. To us. He met her eyes and she saw genuine anguish there. I found her grimoire hidden beneath our chambers. The spells she used on both of us, they were all documented. The bond we shared was never real, Vesna. She planted it. Used blood magic to make me believe you were my mate, then broke it herself when she was ready to take my place. I did not know. I swear to you, I did not know. Vesna should have felt vindicated, should have felt rage. Instead, she felt only urgency. Where is she now? In the castle. She arrived an hour ago, claiming to bring condolences from Duskhollow. His jaw tightened. She's in the king's chambers. Vesna ran. The corridors blurred past. Servants shouted questions she did not stop to answer. She took the stairs 3 at a time, her pulse racing, and the vial clutched tight in her hand. She burst through the doors of Lorcan's chambers to find Daciana standing over the bed, one hand pressed against Lorcan's frozen chest. Dark energy crackled around her fingers. Step away from him! Daciana turned, her beautiful face twisted with malice. Sister, you returned too late. In moments, the curse will take him completely, and you will have nothing. Again. I know what you did. Vesna's voice shook with fury. The false bond, the years of manipulation, all to keep me from discovering what I am. What you are is dangerous. Daciana's eyes blazed. Do you know what the fire wolves became? They burned kingdoms, destroyed empires. Our mother's line was supposed to end with her. I made certain of that. You tried. You failed. Vesna uncorked the vial and drank. The effect was immediate. Heat exploded through her veins like liquid sunlight. She felt something ancient stirring in her blood, something that had been caged her entire life, finally breaking free. Her vision sharpened, her skin flushed. When she looked at her hands, faint flames danced along her fingertips. Daciana stumbled backward. No, that's impossible. I bound you. Your bindings are ash. Vesna's voice resonated with power she had never known she possessed. And so will you be, if you do not leave. Now. Fear flickered in her sister's eyes. Real fear. The kind of terror Daciana had spent years inflicting on others. She fled. Vesna did not pursue. There would be time for justice later. Now there was only Lorcan, frozen and still, his breath coming in shallow gasps as the ice crept toward his heart. She climbed onto the bed and lay against him, wrapping her arms around his frozen body. The cold was shocking. even through the fire now blazing in her blood. But she did not let go. "I am here," she whispered against his ear. "I know the truth now. You are my true mate. Not Cormac. You. It was always supposed to be you." She pressed her palm against his chest, directly over his heart, and let the fire pour through her. The flames did not burn. They glowed, golden and warm, sinking into Lorcan's frozen skin. Wherever her fire touched, the ice began to melt. Water ran in rivulets across his chest, soaking the sheets. Steam rose around them in clouds. Vesna poured everything she had into him. Every moment of love, every ounce of heat, every fragment of the power her sister had tried so hard to suppress. "Come back to me," she pleaded. "I need you to come back. Our child needs a father. Your kingdom needs a king. I cannot do this alone." For an agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then Lorcan drew a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes opened, gray as winter storms but clear, so wonderfully clear. He looked at her with confusion, then wonder, then overwhelming relief. "Vesna." Her name was a ragged whisper. "You're burning." She laughed through her tears. "I know. Apparently, I have been my entire life. I just needed someone cold enough to notice." His hand came up to cup her face, and for the first time since she had known him, his skin was warm. Warm. "The curse," he said dazedly. "I cannot feel it. It's gone. I melted it, along with some of the bedsheets, unfortunately." Lorcan stared at her as if she had hung the moon and stars. Then he pulled her down and kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, dawn was creeping through the windows. "You saved me," he said quietly. "We saved each other." Vesna pressed her forehead to his. "I would never have found my fire if you hadn't given me a place where I was finally warm." 6 months later, spring came to Eisenhold for the first time in living memory. The eternal snows retreated from the lower slopes. The frozen lake thawed at its edges, revealing dark water that sparkled under the sun. Flowers bloomed in the castle gardens, hardy mountain varieties that had been dormant for generations. Vesna stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the transformation with wonder. In her arms, a baby girl with silver hair and pale gray eyes like her father gurgled happily. "She has your stubbornness," Lorcan said, joining them. He wrapped his arms around both of them from behind, his warmth a constant miracle. "And your dramatic timing. She arrived in the middle of the council meeting about northern trade routes. The council needed an excuse to stop arguing." Vesna leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. A heart that had been frozen for years, now warm and strong, and entirely hers. Much had changed since that desperate night when she had burned the curse away. Daciana had fled to the Eastern Territories, but Cormac had provided testimony of her blood magic along with the grimoire he had discovered, and she was now a wanted criminal across the north. Their father had died in disgrace after the truth emerged about his complicity in hiding Vesna's heritage. The wolves of Eisenhold had embraced their new queen with surprising enthusiasm. A fire wolf on the frozen throne was seen as a blessing, a sign that the long winter was finally ending. And Lorcan, freed from the curse that had isolated him for so long, had become the king he had always wanted to be: fair, compassionate, willing to listen rather than simply command. "Do you ever think about it?" Vesna asked softly. "How close we came to losing everything?" "Every day." His arms tightened around her. "And every day I am grateful that you were stubborn enough to save me anyway." "I prefer determined. I prefer magnificent." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "My magnificent queen, my true mate, my everything." Vesna turned in his arms, careful not to jostle the baby, and kissed him properly. Her husband. Her king. The man she had never expected to find and could no longer imagine living without. Below them, the ice continued to melt. The world they had known was transforming, making way for something new. They had both come to this marriage broken, rejected, cursed by forces beyond their control. But in finding each other, they had found something neither had dared to hope for. A love strong enough to melt winter itself.